Thank you, Joe. Well, I might disabuse you of that during the course of this speech. Listen, first of all, a big congratulations to new and retiring Labour and Co-op, Labour, there you go, Joe.
Yeah.
Hand excuse so early on in the conversation. To new and returning Labour and Co-op councillors. We're now approaching nearly 800 strong, right across the length and the breadth of the country. So we can be proud about just how far we're growing. Secondly, thank you to the Co-op Party team. This is why, by the way, they didn't want to open the door. They were fearful that the banner would fly across the room and cause injury to people. But it does mean that nobody's going to faint. Well, certainly not as a result of the windows being closed anyway. Now, I'm here in two forms, really. I suppose one, as the Shadow Local Government Minister, and secondly, as a newly elected chair of the parliamentary group of MPs and peers in Parliament. My involvement in co-op politics didn't start just when I came into Oldham Council, and it didn't start, of course, when I came into Parliament. If you are a cooperator, it's in your blood, it's in your DNA. It's more than just a project, it's more than just a task, it's who you are, it's part of your identity. And actually, if you are Labour and Co-op, being Labour and Co-op is different than just being Labour. That idea of grassroots organisation of where people come together and the value that they can share is absolutely fundamental to how we believe that society should organise in our country. Now, for me, that was about community projects. It was about turning Oldham Council into a cooperative council and all that mattered with that. It was about setting up the Cooperative Council Innovation Network, where council could work together, big shout out at the back, to get together, to share ideas, good practice. Local government do fantastic things, but I've got to say, often we're so secret squirrel about it. Best kept secrets in many local authorities and many town halls because people just don't go out and share anywhere near enough the ideas that they have. Well, the Innovation Network is one way of doing that. And if we think about where the co-op movement have come from and the issues at that time, people will ask, well, is a party that has such a history relevant in today's world? And I would say this, co-op values and the need for co-ops is more important today than ever it was before. The values of grassroots organisation, of contribution, and stepping up to tackle head-on the real lived issues that affect so many communities are important. And so when we talk about the co-op movement, we need to go back to our foundations and back to our roots. For the British society, co-op values and the co-op movement is absolutely woven in to the fabric of who we are as a country. The rapid growth of the co-op movement to drive innovation in the 19th century has many parallels with a need for the co-op movement today. Then it was a response to the Industrial Revolution, which threatened the way of lives of many people working in industry. They saw profit and power being held by the few and not the many. And in 2018, we're living now through a fourth industrial revolution in the West. We see property and wealth and power being held in the hands of the few and not the wider community that we're here to serve. Like the 19th century, too few have a stake in the means of production, and we see that it's different today, but it's still exploitation. Whether it's the gig economy, zero-hour contracts, exploitation in the workplace, and we see that in Sports Direct and Amazon and many others. But today we have the threat of automation and digital. Now that provides many opportunities, but for many working people, it also provides a real question mark over their future employment too. And that change is happening so quickly. Governments can't keep up with the pace of change. By the time we realise that there's a problem to be addressed, it takes so long to take that through Parliament and to change the legislation that actually the problem then is different than the one that we started legislating for originally. And so the response has got to be far more about people and community, society coming together and taking that responsibility on. And so what do we see today? 6,000 cooperatives in the UK, owned by 17 million individuals, contributing £37 billion to the UK economy. And it's a growing sector too. Now, in the UK, there is a genuine feeling of powerlessness among workers. So if you look at the YouGov poll that was had not too long ago, 67% of people said that they felt that the economy was out of control. Many people don't believe they have the power to influence change in their workplace. They feel powerless. They're working hard, they're making the contribution, they're making their owners very wealthy, but when it comes to having a voice over modernisation and change, quite often the voice just isn't heard. When we went through the European referendum, what were people saying? Were people saying, do you know what, not quite keen on as an institution? They weren't saying that at all. It wasn't a debate, certainly not in Oldham, about the rights and wrong of the EU as an organisation and as a political organisation that was bringing different nations together. What it was about was a reaction to the settlement that people were told was inevitable and was going to stay the same or even get worse, where people had seen access to decent housing, decent jobs, decent education, and a decent future taken away. And how was it explained to people? Well, that's just progress. That's just what happens. And what Brexit was for me was a wake-up call to politicians. And if we don't hear that call loud and clear, where people are demanding to have power over their lives and their future, then, we risk a very significant political backlash coming. Now, I see Labour and Co-op councils as leading the way on this. Now, we have seen an ambitious manifesto from the Labour Party, heavily influenced by the Co-op Party through the work of Joe and the team who have really worked hard to make sure it's hardwired. But be clear, we absolutely need to rebuild what's been taken away through austerity, because we know that's had a really terrible impact on our community. But we need to be very careful that we don't run towards a bloated state. People aren't asking to be told what to do by the state any more than they're being told what's happening to their jobs and their lives. It's just inevitable either. We need to make sure that we have an empowering state that is genuinely committed to giving power back into the hands of people. And that's why things like actually, the pledge that people are being asked to sign up to today on modern day slavery is so important, because what that is about is saying to people that actually what you have been told is just the way you've got to live and it's just inevitable isn't the case at all. And what we're asking councils to do through their procurement and the way that they do business is to go even further than legislation and actually set the mark about what we believe a fair and just society should be. So if you're a councillor in the room today and your council hasn't signed up to that pledge, please do take it back, because it's so important. If we don't set the bar on what type of country we want Britain to be, then we can't be too sorry if we look to one side and see that it's not the Britain that we aspire to. But when we move towards a devolved settlement, it can't be that we're just creating new jobs for politicians. When people want that demand for control, what they want to say is that when things affect me and my community and my family, I want to be able to affect change. I don't want to know how many different politicians to try and work my way through to be sold the same answer. And equally, the lessons of the past as well. When we were in government last time, we had an ambitious agenda. We built hospitals, we built schools, we put people to work and created decent, secure employment for people. And that was great. But we didn't push power down anywhere near as much as we ought to have done, so people could themselves decide what was important for them and their communities. And to be honest, what matters in Oxford will be different than what matters in Oldham. But we all need resources to be able to build the type of local communities that we want. And that's where I come on to the financial foundations. So if you believe in empowering the community, if you believe and that's where power ought to be, if you believe that devolution is a mechanism for pushing power down to communities, well, the foundation that it rests on has got to be secure. And if we don't get the financial settlement right, then all we're going to do is to devolve blame. So we'll say it was nothing to do with us because we pushed power down, but if the resources aren't there to resolve it, then we're afraid we're just going to see more of the same. And let's be honest about what we have seen. No new money for children's services, no new money for adult social care, pennies to deal with the homelessness crisis that we've got, and almost no money to build decent, secure housing for people today and in the future. The financial base of many local authorities has been completely taken away by this government. And people are feeling it in their everyday lives too. The recent Joseph Rowntree report pointed to 1.5 million people in our country that have been pushed into destitution, struggling to make ends meet and struggling to fund just basic bare essentials. And we see that in our communities with the rise of the food bank too. Now, co-op councils are leading the way on some of this, whether it's about procurement, whether it's about redesigning public services, and there are examples right through the country from Newcastle. And if you've not seen this, I really recommend the 100, a big shout out at the back again, although I have taken the last copy. So you have to go online if you want another one, because I'm taking this back to Oldham. 150 innovations of what we can achieve in government when we put the community first and involve the community. So if you haven't seen this, go online and see it. And you'll see their stories from Croydon and Glasgow, Cardiff and Lambeth, real lived examples of what they're doing on the ground. Now, we said already that we're now 800 councillors strong and approaching that. But we've also seen in Greenwich, in Southwark, in Brighton, where the vast majority of those Labour groups are Labour and Co-op. So when you go back to your council and you're speaking to your ward colleagues and your cabinet members and people in the wider Labour group, just ask them if they're a member of the Co-op Party. And if they're not a member of the Co-op Party, ask them why not. And really sell them the idea of what we can achieve, not just when we're Labour, but when we're Labour and Co-op, where we put community empowerment right at the heart of what we do. Now, for my part, I'm going to use my position in Parliament as chair of the Co-op Parliamentary Group, as a shadow minister, but actually just as a cooperator to make sure that you have a voice in Parliament, and we'll be working to coordinate the work of parliamentarians who are Labour and Co-op to make sure that we get better bang for our buck, if you like. So if you've got ideas, if you've got case studies, if you've got real lived examples from your local area that we can use to highlight that there is an alternative to the way the Tories have run this country, then we will absolutely take that and we will use it. And what we'll also be saying is we're not going to wait for Downing Street, and we're not going to wait for the keys of Whitehall departments either. What we should be learning in this period of opposition is, first of all, Labour's not in opposition in every part of the country. In many parts of our country, in our town halls, Labour is in government. It just happens to be grassroots government connected to their communities and making a difference on the ground. And we can't believe that that's just a stopgap until we get a Labour government and we get the keys to the Whitehall departments and get into Downing Street. We should be using this now to realise that that grassroots organisation and that grassroots building is actually the future and not just a temporary measure until we get Labour in government at a national level. We've got the ambition, we've got the drive, and we're across towns and cities already to make a real difference. We're growing all the time. Do make sure you do your part to secure new members. I did want to pull Joe up actually on this leaflet that I've seen, because I know we're trying to grow and we're trying to grow our appeal, and I know that we're proud of our history. But when I seen the leaflet on the table that said party like it's 1844, I've got to say, we've got to draw a line at appealing to the Jacob Rees-Mogg vote of the future. So be proud of our past and our history and our foundation, but actually don't underestimate just how relevant the Co-op movement is today. Don't underestimate that if we want a fairer Britain, a Britain that really rights the wrongs that are lived experiences for too many people in our community, well, the only way to do that isn't just with a Labour government, it's going to be with a Labour and distinctly Co-op government too. Thank you.